And direct from Newmanstown, Pennsylvania, on this beautiful and glorious July 18th, a Monday, 2023. And I'm privileged to have with me today, we are privileged to have with us today, our brother George Widger, who is probably one of the most erudite individuals as far as digging out all the intricate facts and details of the Jesuit rule here in the United States. So, Brother George, welcome to the broadcast.
Well, thank you, Brother Eric. It's always it's a pleasure to be on with you. And it's not just the United States, it's the entire world.
I agree. Very good. Because if there was someone like you overseas, I'd have him on my broadcast. There is a guy that's pretty good. He's a young guy in England, but he, for some reason, doesn't want to come on. So you have the center stage, Brother George.
Okay, so before I address your comments and get into the presentation, my scripture verse is Genesis 3, verse 1. Genesis 3, verse 1. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord hath made. And he said unto the woman, the serpent, he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden. Now, this is going to be a short little exposition. Now, don't you think Satan would have made an excellent Jesuit?
Well, I maintain that Satan designed the Jesuits, and they've been designed after his principles. And that's one of them there, to not tell the whole truth, just most of it, but not all of it. Because the Lord did say they could eat of all the trees, all the fruit of the garden there. He did say that. But he also said, except one. So that's typical with the devil. He doesn't want to include the entirety of the truth to get you to act on something that's been omitted, and hence you'll be in trouble. But yeah, Jesuit is the devil is the author of the Jesuit order, no doubt.
Well, because as you said, he or his agents will tell you most of the truth, maybe 90, 95%, but there's always that 5 or 10% that'll throw you off, that'll derail you.
Exactly right. I watched JFK Director's Cut last night, and I had seen it many times, but sometimes things just jump out at you even more. And there were a couple very intimate details that I'd kind of missed, and one of them was the musical score for the movie, that I believe it was Mozart who composed it, and it is the most satanic, demonic score of music that I have ever listened to. And I've listened to Wagner, and this is even more sinister than Wagner's. And so the Jesuits, when they put together JFK Director's Cut, chose some of their most favorite sinister music for that. And remember, Mozart had composed an entire composition for them called the Magic Flute. But yeah, it's all there if we look to the details. But go ahead, George.
Okay, not to be nitpicky. Well, actually, reality is probably the Jesuits who wrote Mozart's music. He was just simply their frontman.
Yeah.
And once he outlived his usefulness, they discarded him. And he was like maybe 35 or so when he died. And I wasn't going to talk about music because I have plenty of other things to discuss. But this is something they've been doing for centuries. I know we've talked about the Beatles and the so-called British invasion of the 1960s. The Beatles do not write their own music. They did not perform, other than on stage, such as when they're doing their concerts or they're on the Ed Sullivan Show. They did not perform their own music.
Amen, brother. Amen. Okay, so what is your topic? Didn't mean to get you off topic, George. I'm sorry.
Well, I know we only have about an hour or so-ish, but I got an email last week from a fellow in Canada, Ontario, who is asking, well, this is, I'm going to turn the floor over to you in just a moment. He was asking, how does the whole concept of time zones work on the flat Earth model?
Simple. The flat Earth, the Earth is a plane. Above the plane, the sun, the light of the sun shines it casts the light, and then behind it is the shadow, or behind is the darkness. And so as the sun begins to move, then where it is, say, example over here in the east, as it's moving towards the west, we're darker here, but it's lighter in towards the west. So what he needs to do is he needs to get a flat Earth map, or he can get a flat Earth mock-up. And Alexander Gleason is the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant American master of flat Earth teaching of the 1800s. And he needs to get a flat Earth map, and he will see the projection of the sunlight as the sun is moving in its rotation over the top of the flat Earth. And remember, it goes into a larger, wider rotation down to the Tropic of Capricorn. And then as it comes back up to the equator, and then back up to the Tropic of Cancer. But these tropics are flat. They're not global, they're flat. And so you just have to picture it on a flat Earth, but you can see it perfectly on a flat Earth map. So he needs to invest in a flat Earth map. It's going to cost him about $150 or so. I got one mounted on a plaque for me, and I put it in my church building. So everybody can look at it. You can see the sun as it's casting its light, whether it's on the Tropic of Capricorn or the Tropic of Cancer.
Oh, okay. And what was that author's name once again?
Alexander Gleason. He's the father of the flat Earth map.
Alexander Gleason.
Alexander Gleason, an American and a Protestant. Okay, and by the way, he offered to put flat Earth maps in every public school in this country. But the Jesuits kept that from happening, and they caused some agitations, and one of them was the Spanish-American War, and then Einstein, that liar of theirs, and then ultimately World War I, and after that, the whole flat Earth map in the school movement had died, had been killed. But Alexander Gleason was the great man of God who promoted it, and he also wrote a very good book on the flat Earth. Go ahead, George.
Oh, okay. So, yes, him. So I'll definitely have to check him out after we get off the air. Okay. So a couple of things. I got somebody who sent me an email, or a couple of emails, about the late Alan Arkin, who just died a couple weeks ago. And I brought his death up, and I mentioned that his son Matt went to Georgetown University. So you had to, in order to be a successful Jew, you had to kiss the ring. And that's how Alan did so, by sending his son, Matt, to Georgetown. And well, I just wanted to bring up one film that I forgot to cite of his, was the 1970 movie Catch-22. Now, I know we discussed this before, and I read the book by Joseph Heller and watched the film. And if you think about it, it's utterly wicked and diabolical. I know that may sound redundant and repetitive and all that sort of stuff. Probably is. But if you think about it, you could say Catch-22 is your perfect Hollywood film, because it has drunkenness, it has debauchery, it's fornication, and almost all the actors are Jews or Catholics.
Yep. Serving the Pope or the Jesuit order. Sure, you got the censor for Hollywood, who was named Daniel Lord, the Jesuit. Some censor he was. Make sure there's plenty of fornication and murder and sorcery and theft in it. That's his censorship. Make sure that's censored in. Go ahead.
Well, you see, the novel and the subsequent film were basically ultimate examples of controlled opposition. That is to say, Joseph Heller was actually in the Army Air Force during the Second 30 Years' War. I believe he was on a B-24, B-25, one of those. It wasn't a B-17. And he talked about the absolute absurdity of the whole bombing campaign, because his character, Kassarian or whatever it was constantly complaining. He said, why are we bombing these targets? They have no strategic value whatsoever.
Yeah, and you know who else brought that up? Lyndon LaRouche, many years ago, before they sent him to prison. He said the whole bombing campaign in the Far East was utterly nonsense. They could have made a bead straight to Tokyo, but to island hop from one to another was deliberate murder of particularly white Protestant and Baptist American young men of the South primarily, while at the same time continuing the murder of the best of Japanese manhood. Because they had to get rid of Japanese manhood because they had expelled the Jesuits in 1630 at the latest. So Japan had to pay for that 200 or so years of expelling the Jesuits, and so they killed their very best manhood in World War II.
Well, actually, this has involved, Catch-22 involved Europe, specifically the bombing campaign in Italy, which is something people don't talk about. When you talk about European bombing, you usually discuss Germany, but there are other places that the Allies bombed. And yes, Italy, yes, Catholic Italy. I guess it had to be punished for something. I guess
a bomb dropped near the Vatican. And Pius XII went out and put his arms up, and oh God! So that was a mistake by the American Allied bombers. And whoever made that mistake, I would like to know what happened to him. But yeah, they did do that.
Okay, so as I said, we've discussed Catch-22 before, and I don't want to belabor that. Now, there is a film that's going to be coming out this Friday, the 21st, called Oppenheimer. I've not seen it because it hasn't been released yet, but it is.
What's it called again? Cut out, George. What's it called again?
Oppenheimer.
Cut out again. Didn't get it. Go ahead. Give it to me again, please.
Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer. Okay. Very good.
After Julius Robert Oppenheimer, who was the scientist who was the lead scientist for the Manhattan Project between 1942 and 1945. Now, Julius Robert Oppenheimer lived from 1904 to 1967. He was born on the 22nd of April, 1904, died on February the 4th, 1967. And there's some debate as to exactly how he died, or that's another conversation altogether, whether it's a heart attack or cancer or something. So in the film, almost all the lead actors are Catholic, just as in Catch-22, or Jewish, like Robert Downey Jr. So the actor who portrays the eponymous character,
George, it's just as the second Ku Klux Klan warned: blacks, Catholics, and Jews. And that's exactly who runs Hollywood for the Pope.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so the actor who plays Oppenheimer is an Irishman named Cillian Murphy. Now, even though he's from Ireland, he generally speaking plays Americans. He was a psychiatrist in Batman Dark Knight, and he played as an English soldier, I believe, in the 2017 Dunkirk, which is also directed, I believe, by Christopher Nolan. Now, the director of this film is an English American played by Christopher Nolan, who's a devout Roman Catholic. His brother Matthew went to Georgetown University. So
that's nice. I'm glad to see the Jesuits have their hand in educating them. Good. So as soon as they graduate, they go to Hollywood. They go to Jesuit Hollywood. The Jesuits make it look like the Jews run. Go ahead.
Okay, so the lady who plays Oppenheimer's wife, Kitty Oppenheimer, or Catherine or Kitty Oppenheimer, is Emily Blunt. She's a devout Catholic English woman. She's actually married to a devout Polish Roman Catholic, John Krakowski, who's currently is playing Jack Ryan in the current was it Amazon or Prime series?
Oh, I
Jack
see.
Ryan.
And that guy is who again?
John Krakowski.
John Krakowski. So he's Polish, a Polish Catholic?
Correct. Well, he's American, but he's a Polish descent.
Well, the name is Polish. Okay.
Yes. So anyhow, I've not seen the film yet. So it's about, I guess, the turmoil that Oppenheimer had in developing this device, whatever it was. Now, can I just pause here for a second? Or not pause, but just basically park on this point.
Sure.
So it seems that almost every major event in the 20th century, and you could say now in the 21st century, was a fraud or a hoax. In that, you can talk about the so-called space race of the 1950s and 60s, and the so-called moon landing, Apollo 11. But actually, the anniversary of that is just coming up in a couple of days. So you had satellites, or so-called satellites, putting a man in outer space, putting a man on the moon. You had the whole Cold War. You had the threat of the whole airborne nuclear war, which is how the United States was able to justify its foreign policy for decades. Not just with these insane budgets, with these bases, with these contracts, these subcontractors, but basically justifying all these hot wars and secret wars, underground wars, these assassinations, these revolutions.
Yep.
So they're all, now when I say hoax, I'm not saying they didn't happen, but they're basically based on, well, lies, misinformation.
What really happened? It wasn't killing communists. It was killing nationalists of Asian nations. It was destroying nationalists of Italy, like the Gladio left behind. They were destroying nationalists of Italy. So that's the main purpose of the Pope's international intelligence community, is, among other things, to destroy the nationalists of every country.
Yes. So, I mean, so that's how you're able to justify, or actually the people who run the US government and other governments, the British, for example, is, well, we need to do all those horrible things to save the world and to save the West from communism. And that is how
while Washington provides the technology to the major communist nations, and while New York provides the finance to the major communist nations. And all of this is very well documented by John Burke's material, especially None Dare Call It Treason by John Stormer, and his second work on None Dare Call It Treason. He documents hundreds of cases where Washington, or the District of Columbia, the Pope's District of Columbia, has helped to finance and build and to provide technology to communist China and communist Russia. It's absolutely proven. Anyone who denies it doesn't know true history. There's living in fantasy. Go ahead.
So, as I said, almost everything that has happened, say, last 70 or 80 years has been, well, 100 years, has been a complete canard. I mean, there's just, the American people were told by the various U.S. presidents that we need to do these things. We need to go into these wars. We need to support these dictators to save them from communism or save other countries from communism. And so they just simply
without ever really defining the origins of communism, other than blaming a Jew for it, which is completely and totally dishonest. The maxims of communism.
Okay, so I mean,
go ahead.
Okay, so the whole rationalization for the creation of the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, in 1942 was to make sure that another Pearl Harbor didn't happen. And then a few years later, it was replaced permanently by the CIA in 1947, September the 18th. The Catholic in Action, Catholic Invisible Army, Catholic Intelligence Agency, and since the 1980s, the Cocaine Importation Agency.
Yeah, so by the way, you mentioned the OSS and CIA. The first thing the listener needs to think about, whenever you hear OSS, Office of Strategic Services, is to think of the Knight of Malta, William Donovan, or Wild Bill Donovan. Wild Bill Donovan was a complete and total Jesuit coadjutor. And my friend Chris Pinto is putting out another video with his company, Agilum Films. And the name of the new video is called American Jesuits. And on the face of that DVD cover, you have John Surratt, John Wilkes Booth, Pierre de Schmidt, FDR's advisor, Edmund A. Walsh, and then one more guy, Wild Bill Donovan. Absolutely an American Jesuit, founding the intelligence community with the OSS in this country. So I recommend that you get it. He has a pre-sale price on it now. So go to his website, Agilum Films, and get yourself a copy. Or actually, you can buy 5 for $100 or so of American Jesuits. I'm sure he'll do a very good job. Go ahead, brother.
Okay, so the movie is coming out this Friday. I'm actually interested in checking it out. Now, for intelligence purposes, I just want to try to see what sort of nonsense they're going to peddle, because Christopher Nolan has been one of the most successful directors in Hollywood for well over 20 years. As I said, he's done at least one of the Batman films. I believe he did the 2017 Dunkirk, which also had Cillian Murphy. And
another Irish,
I know
another
yes.
Irish Catholic.
Yes. Now,
so by the way, I want to encourage our listeners to begin to develop the skill of identifying someone by their name. So if it's Murphy, it's an Irishman. If it's an O'Toole or O'Donovan or anything O or anything Mick, like McAllister, it's an Irishman. And so you want to be, if it's like Brzezinski, that is Polish. Anything with a ski at the end is Polish. And Italian, you want to learn to identify Italian names like Pacino and so on. Anything Eno at the end is always Italian. So learn to identify names as to what racial and national group they belong to. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, one of the problems is, this is particularly true of Italian or say Jewish, they'll often change their name. Such as Stein will become Stone.
Right.
Or Schwartz will become Black.
Right.
So you have to look up what is the person's actual birth name.
That's true, but that's what I mean. There's a movie out by Glenn Beck called Nefarious, and the guy that's demon possessed, is the demon's talking through him. He says, "The name is everything. Names are important." He's absolutely right. So we always need to look at the names of individuals that we're evaluating.
Well, I mentioned that in a couple of days, I guess the 20th will be the 54th anniversary of the so-called moon landing. And I know I mentioned this a couple of years ago, and I picked this up from somebody else, Eric Bowman, Eric 777. And did you ever? Did you actually watch?
I like Eric Bowman's work. I think he's done some very good work. He has a video up on the huge Jesuit university that they just opened up in Qatar. Unbelievable. So he's done a very good job in exposing many of the Jesuit designs. So I'm very thankful for Eric Bowman. Good for him. Go ahead.
Okay, so the other Eric brought this up a few years ago. He was doing a piece on Jack King. Now, you may not know the name, but there's actually a video of this on YouTube where he does the actual voice of the alleged moon landing, where he says, "Beep, the eagle has landed." Beep.
Yeah.
Well, turns out that Jack King went to Holy Cross.
Oh, good old Jesuit Holy Cross with Chris Matthews and Edward Bennett Williams and all those other centers. Yeah.
Yes. So, could it be any more? Could the moon landing have been any more Jesuitical than that.
No, no. And I recently found out that they filmed the moon landing, or some of the filming of it, at Cannon Air Force Base. So they had a big hangar there that they put sand in, the whole 9 yards, to fake the moon landing at Cannon Air Force Base. And I was stationed in that base in 1973. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Anyhow, so I think I mentioned this to you before, but Barton Zabrell, who did the video or the film back, it was in 1994. Well, the funny thing happened on the way to the moon. I was listening to a video of his within last year or so, and he was talking about the actors whom they got, whom the Jesuits got to portray the astronauts during the moon landing, and one of them was none other than Bruce Lee.
Really?
Now, Lee.
That sounds like Capricorn 1, right?
Yes. So Bruce Lee, he was a wicked man, but he's in great physical shape. I mean, and there's all sorts of debate as to like how he, just like with Oppenheimer, how exactly did he die or why did he die? But that's it. Well, it turns out he died on July the 20th, 1973, exactly 4 years later. So according to Bart, Bruce Lee was one of the actors who portrayed one of the astronauts.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. So he he furthered that deception, just like O.J. Simpson with Capricorn 1.
Yes, indeed. And so you had to.
George, was O.J. Simpson a black Freemason? George, was O.J. Simpson a black
yes.
right Freemason or something like that?
I don't know, but probably. You don't.
Yeah, you don't get where he got without being an insider. And of course, he was ultimately rewarded with his white wife, whom he viciously murdered, aided by his son Jason. But go ahead. Don't mean to get you off track.
Okay, so are you talking about his Catholic, German-born white wife?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Who was buried actually in a Catholic cemetery just south of in Los Angeles.
Is that right?
Yes. Now, but a few hours ago, just before we started the stream, you and I were talking about the upcoming broadcast, and so we're talking shop, so to speak, and we're talking about the film that's coming out this Friday called Oppenheimer. But one of the characters in the film is General Leslie Gore, who oversaw
Leslie Groves. Leslie Groves.
Oh, I'm sorry, Leslie Gore. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
George, you're being gory on my broadcast. Now, I appreciate if you stop it right now, George. Yeah, Leslie Groves. He was a very arrogant Presbyterian. He helped to oversee the building of the Pentagon that was built by Pennsylvania Knight of Malta John McShane out of Philadelphia. So, just Leslie Groves was a very sinister man. Yeah, I think he had to be a Freemason too, wasn't he, George?
Well, probably. Now, it would have been far more interesting if Leslie Gore were actually in charge, and he is definitely a better singer. But Leslie Groves, yes. Thank you for the correction.
You're getting mixed up with Al Gore. Maybe Al Gore had a brother named Leslie. Who knows, George?
Well, there's a singer back in the 1960s named Leslie Gore. His probably big hit was "It's My Party and I'll Cry If I Want to."
Oh, that woman, yes. Uh-huh.
Yes. She also did Now It's Judy's Turn to Cry. But anyhow, well, maybe I should get back on topic before I start to cry. But anyhow, so Matt Damon plays General Leslie Groves, not Gore.
So
but I guess that'll probably be
Roman Catholic Matt Damon plays Leslie Groves.
Well, yes, and I just got some confirmation.
Leslie Groves had quite a gut on him. I don't know if Matt Damon could play that. He was quite rotund.
Okay. Well, perhaps he was. Well, it turns out that Matt Damon's wife, Lucrecia Moreo, was born in Argentina. She went to, in English, she went to St. Thomas Aquinas High School in Buenos Aires.
Oh, that's great. The angelic doctor of the papacy with his authorship of Summa Theologica, where he wrote, after the first and second admonition, the heretic must be exterminated. Yeah, good old Thomas Aquinas. Go ahead, brother.
Yes, and I'm sure the Jesuits don't like that because they wish they're the ones who came up with that.
That's true. Well, that's why they love Thomas Aquinas. They love Aquinas and teach Aquinas in their schools. Because he validates the temporal power of the Pope, and that's what the Jesuits are all about, primarily.
Well, I'm sure the Jesuits have posthumously inducted Aquinas into their order.
Well, without a doubt. I mean, I believe it's Boyd Barrett in his work, The Jesuit Enigma. He tells us that the Jesuits were always teaching Aquinas to the novices and the scholastics, I believe.
So getting okay. I'm looking for my notes, but my computer just went down, so I'm just have to, for the next moment or two, I'll just need to talk off the cuff. Now, I know we were talking about the movie Oppenheimer.
Hello, Moto.
Sorry, that's my phone. So Julius Robert Oppenheimer had a young brother.
Tell your phone to be quiet and stop interrupting you, George.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, okay. I just told that to my phone. Okay, so Julius Robert Oppenheimer had a younger brother named Frank, who was also a scientist. He went to Caltech and various other places, and he actually was just as educated as Robert. Well, among the other things, Frank founded the Exploratorium in San Francisco, which is basically, they call it a scientific funhouse, and I've actually been there before. And it lives up to its name because it has all sorts of intriguing sites, intriguing, I guess, exhibits, I guess that's what you call it. But it didn't dawn on me at the time, but almost everything they push is Jesuitical. It's Counter-Reformation. They talk about Darwin and the universe, being billions of years old, and the Big Bang, all that.
There we go. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's exactly right.
So
that's their religion. Those are all tenets. They're paganistic, Babylonian, humanistic, man-centered faith. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I decided to look at, who runs the Exploratorium now. Well, the director of this Exploratorium is a fellow by the name of Lindsay Bierman, Bierman, Bierman. He's of a Jewish background, and he got his undergrad degree from Georgetown University.
Wonderful. Why, he's fitted now to go into the empire where the Jesuits want to send him. And they sent him to the exploratory there. What do you call them in San Francisco? What do you call it? What was the name, George?
The Exploratorium.
The Exploratorium, where we're going to explore. Oh, goody. We're going to go beyond the stars and go where no man's gone before. Star Trek. There we go. Go ahead, George.
Well, so you have Mr. Bierman, who's the director there, who was trained with the Jesuits at Georgetown University. Now they have a long list of people who are on the board of directors and on the board of trustees. As I said, the aforementioned Lindsay Bierman. Well, you also have Roberta Katz.
As Jewish. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
You have Michael Jacobson.
Another Jew. So we got plenty of Jews on the board of trustees to make it look like the Jews run all of it. Right? That's good. That's a typical Jesuit canard.
Well, okay, it may be for cover, but they need competent people to run their empire.
That's true. It's very true. That's why they got a Jew to be the bookkeeper for the Mafia Commission in Meyer Lansky. The Sicilians couldn't do it themselves. They didn't have the brains, so they hired a Jew, Meyer Lansky, and he kept the books. But he had no vote on the commission. Go ahead.
Okay, so you also another member is Kevin Foster. He's on the board of trustees for the Exploratorium. He got his undergrad degree in Villanova, which is not Jesuit, it's Catholic. That's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
That campus is huge. It's a huge multi-million-dollar campus going into the billions, I'm sure. And between Villanova and St. Joseph's in Philadelphia, that's one huge, massive Roman Catholic Jesuit brainwash of the youth going to those universities, and they're paying top dollar to go there. It is not free, not inexpensive. Yep.
Okay, so another member of the board of trustees, I'll just mention a couple more, is Lynn Fritz. He got his undergrad degree also from Georgetown University.
I see. Fritz, is that a Jewish name or is that another kind of name?
Okay, and I'll just share one other name. Another member of the board of trustees is Craig Silverstein.
Well, that's obviously Jewish. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they got all these upfront Jews going to take the blame for when everybody realizes that the earth is a plane, it's not a globe. It's going to create all kinds of rage. And what to do? Blame the Jews. Let the Jesuits escape as usual.
Well, speaking now, I mentioned Craig Silverstein, who's on the board of trustees of the Exploratorium in San Francisco. Now, there's a Larry Silverstein who actually bought the World Trade Center a few months before 9/11.
That's right. Another upfront Jew that they can blame for 9/11. And then the Jews dancing on the top of their vans across the pond, across the river with in New Jersey, dancing after this because it looks like Mossad now is behind 9/11. As Silverstein gets paid for the insurance company for a pullet. We just decided to pull it. So more and more blame the Jew, and it's going to continue to grow and grow. Well, the Jesuits will never successfully and continuously be exposed. Nope.
Okay, so I believe the Mossad was involved in 9/11, but they served an ancillary role.
Of course, they're the tail. The head is the CIA. We know from the work Secret War Against the Jews, written by Irish Catholic John Loftus, that the BND and the CIA worked together to found the Mossad in 1951. So Mossad is nothing but the tail of the CIA. That's why Oliver North was over there working with Mossad, because he was CIA and NSA. So it's the tail. The tail does not wag the dog. The head wags the tail. The CIA wags the Mossad. And by the way, the Mossad was made up of Jewish traitors because they destroyed the patriotic Irgun, of which I hope I would have been a member of, and gave way to Haganah, and Haganah then became Mossad. So it's totally run by the papacy, and anybody that's a true nationalist in Israel is thwarted, is beaten down. And like I said, they did away with all the Irgun members.
And of course, one of the founders of the Mossad was Galen, Reinhard Galen.
Reinhard Galen. And who was he?
Well, I'm just going from memory here. Well, during the war, he was a colonel, I guess. Was it the SS? Or
he wasn't SS. He was a colonel in the army, and he was in charge of Hitler's armies east. And he was the one that betrayed von Paulus's Sixth Army so that it would not be allowed to retreat. And it was surrounded by Stalin's Red Army and forced to surrender. And Stalin took 91,000 German prisoners took them east into Gulag, and only 5,000 returned after the war. And I would imagine most of them were Roman Catholics. So they killed all those Lutherans boys that they betrayed into the hands of Jesuit Stalin when von Paulus's army was forced to surrender. And Gellin was a part of this. And that's another reason why they took him in. And they had what was called the Secret Treaty of Fort Hunt in Virginia. And that gave way to the founding of the Gellin Org, that would later be the BND, as well as the CIA.
And NASA.
And what?
And NASA.
Oh, NASA. Yeah, never a straight answer. Founded by ex-Nazis like Werner von Braun and others. Mm-hmm.
Well,
working on their deep underground military bases and projects. Well, pretending yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so von Braun was an apostate Lutheran, a Masonic apostate Lutheran.
Yes, he was.
And so, they had to use a few people like him and like Goering and so forth. Oh, see, it wasn't, the Nazis weren't just Catholics. You did have these apostate Lutherans.
Yes,
but
Goering was an apostate Lutheran.
Yes.
So was Eichmann. Eichmann was an apostate Lutheran. So they love parading the apostate Lutherans in front of you to make you think it's Lutheran. So we can blame the Eurasian Jewish Holocaust on Luther and the Lutherans and the Lutheran Church. They love that.
Well, I realize we've been going for close to an hour. There are a couple of points I wanted to mention that have been in my hopper for a while. Remember, you and I weren't during streams for 3 or 4 months because of all sorts of technical issues. So there's some things that took place while we were not streaming that I'd like to bring up. 1 or 2. I guess on April the 27th of this year, Jerry Springer died at the age of 79. He was born on the 13th of February, 1944 in England.
Thank God he's gone. Another apostate Jew that further demoralized the country, Jerry Springer. Thank God he's
okay. Now, we can make these accusations, but I do need to provide some receipts. He got his undergrad degree from Tulane University in New Orleans, where he was a member of Tau Epsilon Phi, which was historically a Jewish fraternity. It was established in 1913 at New York University. For decades, it was exclusively Jewish, but then during the 1950s, they opened it up to non-Jews, Gentiles. But interestingly enough, almost all their non-Jewish members were Catholic.
Sure, that makes sense. Yep.
So,
and there will never
if you look at the iconography,
there will never be a Bible-believing Protestant in their midst, because if you believe the Bible, you're not going to join these secret societies. No Bible-believing Protestant or Baptist joins a secret society. And if he does, he's in sin or he's not even saved. That's why I get after the Southern Baptists. There's 1 million Freemasons in the Southern Baptist denomination. So why would any Bible-believing, born-again man of God be a member of any Southern Baptist Masonic church? Go ahead.
Okay, so if you look at their iconography, which is something I like to do, because that probably gives you, just looking at their symbol gives you plenty of information. You see a menorah, which is 7 candles. In the middle of it is a so-called Star of David. I realize that's not a Star of David. That's a Kabbalistic sex symbol. I'll just leave it at that.
Star of your God, Remphan, as we read in the book of Acts. Mm-hmm. 6-pointed star of Remphan. Go ahead.
Okay, but it's actually a sexual symbol. I'll just leave it at that.
Sure.
But you also see a lantern, like a magic, like a genie's lamp. You also see like a skull. Boy, this just doesn't seem like a benevolent society.
That's right. That's right.
So anyhow, that was Jerry Springer's key to success. So he later, became a lawyer. He was involved. He used to live in Cincinnati, Ohio. So he got involved with the city council there. He became a mayor. He was a used car salesman.
It's a nice Jesuit city. What's the university they have in Cincinnati? Xavier?
Correct.
Yeah. Big Jesuit university in Cincinnati called Xavier University, named after Francis Xavier, a right-hand man of Ignatius Loyola. Go ahead, George.
Yes, indeed. But people probably most knew Jerry Springer for his syndicated TV show, which ran from 1991 to 2018. And initially, it was just a straight talk show where you'd have guests who would come on and ask them questions about their life or fellow entertainers. But then, within a few years, it developed into a celebration of white trash culture. People who lived in trailer parks and saying, you can't, people come on there
and fornicating with the blacks. We got to see these white girls. Who's the real black father of their baby that they're carrying? Just more awful miscegenation and amalgamation of the blacks and the whites to further destroy the white race in North America in preparation for our two-front war. So, yeah, so he was big on that. Jerry. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I was discussing this with somebody earlier or recently, that the Jesuits like to push the stupid. The dumber something is, the more popular it is. Whether you're talking Jerry Springer, we were discussing last week the Beverly Hillbilly, Gomer Pyle, Gilligan's Island.
And you have to portray those people as Southerners, because all those white Protestant Southerners are stupid, and those white women in the South, nothing but a bunch of Southern dumbbells. They often have to be portrayed as stupid and unpolished and backwooded, and they just love that image to portray in Hollywood.
Well, and of course, this is something that's been going on for decades, since at least the 1950s, maybe in the since at least the 1960s and perhaps the 1950s. And something that's been under attack probably in the last 30 plus years is the whole idea of husbands and fathers. Look at shows that have been popular. Al Bundy on Married with Children, played by devout Irish Roman Catholic Ed O'Neill. You have Homer Simpson in The Simpsons. And the fathers, the husbands, the white men are usually portrayed as incompetent buffoons who are completely clueless as to what's going on in the world, how to raise their family.
The women know it all. The white women are going to tell them what to do, and this is how it is, and you can do what I say, and oh, you're so stupid, George. And Fred, or the Flintstones, Wilma's going to tell Fred what to do. I mean, it's in everything. The beating down of the white alpha male leader of the family to submit to a woman and do what she tells him to do. And that's really what a good husband is, isn't it? He says he does everything that she wants. Go ahead, George.
Well, yes, exactly. And of course, you mentioned the Flintstones. Of course, Barney and Fred, the two main male characters in that, were part of the Moose Lodge.
Yeah, the Tall Cedars. The Tall Cedars, yeah. Yeah, I remember they put a cedar tree on Fred's head or something. Yeah.
Yes. So, I thought it was the Moose Lodge, but they're part of some sort of secret society.
Yeah, portraying it as
good. That is how they do it.
Family, the liar portraying it as a wonderful, good thing.
Okay, so
George, is anything a good thing where you're going to meet in secret with a bunch of other men, and whatever you talk about, you can't tell your wife? Is that good for marriage? Is that good for your relationship with? Honey, what'd you talk about? Can't tell you. All right, really? See, the whole secret society morality is anti-marriage, because they have their secrets that not their children can know nor their wife. Go ahead, brother.
Well, if you think about this as insidious and brilliant, because this is something the Jesuits have been doing for generations, and they disguise it through humor, by comedy, or through cartoons, animations. Whether you're talking about films, say Disney films going back to 1930s, or children's cartoons in the 1960s, they foster several different concepts: rebellion against legitimate authority, your parents, your teachers, society. Also, a sense of they make witchcraft and sorcery acceptable. It's funny. It's comical. It's a punchline.
Yeah, like Bewitched.
And
funny. Darren, or the other one was My Dream of Jeannie. Yeah, and of course, he looks like an idiot too. Well, both those men are idiots.
Well, you just made reference to Larry Hagman's character, Tony. Got a name, but he was actually an astronaut.
Yes, he was. Promoting that fantasy. Go ahead.
Speaking of fantasy, I actually have this in my notes. There's an actress, I believe she's still acting, named Melissa Joan Hart. For those who may not be familiar with her, she's been popular since the 1990s. She was born on April the 18th, 1976. She grew up Catholic, and she made her name for herself on some American cable shows, Nickelodeon. Clarissa Explains It All in the early 1990s. But she switched over to I guess, a broadcast show in the 1996, called Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Yes, Sabrina the Teenage. I never watched that, but I remember the title of that. Yeah, because the Jesuits have to promote in Hollywood what the Lord says will be absolutely predominant in the last half of the 70th week of Daniel, when that last half is called the Great Tribulation. And during those 3.5 years, the four major works are fornication, theft, murder, and sorcery. So you can see them bringing more and more sorcery into Hollywood. And of course, holly is the sorcerer's wood. And so they have holly for Hollywood.
Okay, well, as was it Paul Harvey used to say, there's more to the story. Her character, she was known as in the TV show, she was known as Sabrina. Her surname was Spellman.
Really? Her surname being her last name. Her last name was Spellman. Okay. Any relation to the American Pope, Francis Cardinal Spellman, that Irish Roman Catholic king of the church here in America, the American Pope? The 1988 called the American Pope by, what was his name? Oh, it'll lose me right now. But it's 1988, the American Pope, and it's all about Francis Cardinal Spellman.
Okay, that I don't know, but there's at least two meanings. It could be an homage to Francis, but it could also be, well, she's casting spells.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And of course,
I think all these folks cast spells. When they start waving the other hand in front of you, they start going, well, in the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost. I think that's an occult spell. And it spellbinds people that look at that stuff. Yeah. Same way with their pouring of their water at a baby called baptism. All those little babies getting demonically oppressed about that time, because the priest is an administrator for the demonic system of Satan. Wherever you have more priests, you have all these major works: fornication, theft, murder, and fornication, theft, murder, sorcery. Go ahead.
Well, the show actually was launched on September the 27th, 1996. And as I said, her character's name was Sabrina Spellman. I realize all of those could be coincidences.
There are no coincidences, as Blaise Pascal would write. There are no coincidences in that speech in the initial speech of the movie V for Vendetta, which the Jesuits most assuredly had to write that speech for the guy who plays Guy Fawkes. If you've never heard that speech in the initial beginnings of the movie Vendetta, where he saves the woman from rape, it is a most erudite, poetic speech, one of the most erudite I've ever heard of. So get the movie and listen to that speech. And he says, there's no such thing as coincidence. But go ahead.
Well, I understand. I was being facetious. But so that they always choose a date. They always choose their dates for a reason. Now, we may not understand it, and I certainly don't, but there's always a Kabbalistic purpose as to why they choose certain dates, certain locations, certain time. Say what you will about the Jesuits, they may be very clinical, but they're also very superstitious.
Well,
they say, oh, yes, we're going to choose.
I don't think superstition is a good word, George. I think they're very occultic. They're imbibed with satanic powers. They do things because this is pursuant to Satan's worship that he has instituted among them, and he has his days. Even as the Lord has his days, Satan has his days. So to the uninitiated, we would call them superstitious. But for those who know, they're doing that based on certain irrefutable facts of Satan's mystery of iniquity and his religion that runs it. Go ahead, George.
Well, I realize we're almost done. I mean, so for example, something we've discussed before. On January the 10th, 2017, Anthony Stephen Fauci was trained by the Jesuits at Holy Cross and Regis High School, Manhattan, New York, spoke at Jesuit Georgetown University. And he said, sometime during the Trump administration, there would be a surprise outbreak. Now, as I said, he said this on January the 10th, 2017, 10 days before Donald Trump took office. Well, as it just so happens, that was exactly 33 years to the day in 1984 that Ronald Reagan reestablished diplomatic relations with the Vatican.
Oh, when he did that in 1984?
Correct.
For which reason they made him a Knight of Malta?
Correct.
J. Peter Grace loved him as a wonderful man, head of the Knights at the time. And Reagan names J. Peter Grace the head of the Grace Commission to find out where the tax money is being spent. And of course, the Knights know all about it. But indeed, very good, George.
Okay, so as I said, it's exactly 33 years to the date that Anthony Fauci spoke at Georgetown University, to commemorate the reestablishment of diplomatic relations with the Vatican. So, and I know you talked about this in Vatican Assassins and on several broadcasts, but for what it's worth, construction of the World Trade Center began in 1968. Well, some people say, well, the foundation was laid 2 years earlier, 1966, but construction began exactly 33 years after the event. So they need to have the right numbers, the right dates, the right locations, and it's completely satanic. I don't quite understand it, why they choose these numbers, but they have a reason for it.
Sure, it's in their religion. You even see the number religion in the movie The Matrix. Everything's numbers. When you take the people off the gold standard, then all the money system becomes a numbering system. And whenever the Jesuits are in charge of a numbering system, that's their baby. They control it all. The last thing they want is any real substance, because with that, you can't bring people into a complete and total numbering system. Anyway, George, we're coming to the end of the podcast, so if you have another point you want to make, and then we're going to have to go.
Oh, okay, so yes, something I want to bring up. This happened in March. I'll probably have to bring this up over a few different streams, but there are a number of financial collapses this year in the U.S. and actually over in Europe. The first one was in March. It was a Silicon Valley Bank, which basically they financed the dot boom, about 20, 25 years ago. So the former director of Silicon Valley Bank was Roger Dunlap, and he got his He got his master's degree from Santa Clara University.
And
So,
what's George?
I'm sorry,
What's Santa Clara University?
is a Jesuit.
So
he,
the guy that was the head of the bank for Silicon Valley was trained by Jesuits. Right?
well, he retired. He retired just before the collapse.
That's nice. So he didn't lose anything, right?
Correct. So, but if you look at all these other financial institutions, without exception, all of them were run by Jesuits. And owing to time constraints, I won't elaborate on that now, but I'll have to do that.
Can do it next time.
Yes. So, shall I give my contact information?
Yes, George. Good to have you on the broadcast today.
Okay.
Our listeners love you, George.
Oh,
I think they like you more than me, so I'm jealous. Okay. But give your contact, George, if you would, and people, if they want questions to be answered or topics to be covered, please go ahead. So give your contact info, brother.
Well, if I just want to say, if people haven't found something that they don't like about me, it's simply because they haven't listened to me long enough. If people have any questions, comments, concerns, critiques, complaints, they can drop me a line at georgewidger1969@gmail.com. That's GEO or WIDGR1969 at gmail.com. If they didn't get that, they can get that from you.
Amen. Well, George, so good to have you on the broadcast today. Thank you for tuning in. I have a book, Vatican Assassins, One in the House of My Friends. Go to my website, vaticanassassins.org, and pick up an ebook, among some other things. Meanwhile, I appreciate your prayers and your gifts. And until the next time we're on, the Lord bless. Maranatha.